You only get so many in. They've got timber. They have timber revenue.
Because the rule
It's
the
pretty
city
amazing.
has.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Subdividers is supposed to put in a road, and it doesn't comply, so.
Well, you're not developing
When you cut it into different lots, you are, you're saying
it.
that.
No, there's no building permits involved.
Yeah.
It's when the building permits come in and start.
Yeah, we're waiting for Nick.
I got 10 seconds.
Make them count, Nick.
All
Get that
right.
last sentence in.
Did everyone read the minutes?
Yes, I make a motion to accept the minutes from January 11th, 2022.
I'll second it.
Second. All in favor? Passes.
The Western States, is that us, the fire department?
Fire department.
Western
No, it
States.
ain't.
No, it isn't.
No, not us.
Wait a minute.
What's it for?
That was the backhoe fluids. For the
Yeah.
backhoe and batteries, 2 batteries.
And then I see on the Juliaetta market bill, there's 2 separate ones for the same amount. $99.41.
And what's the $385.64 for the market?
Oh, yeah.
Diesel?
We had a
For
party.
what?
Or is that all one?
Yeah,
Oh, because, yeah, the 9941 is the one for the 191.69. I have to divide it out,
Yeah. Sure.
into different accounts. So it took
Sewer water.
it took the 191.69 and 74.97, which came to 266.66, and divided it out into 3 separate accounts.
and it was for what though?
One was, for, the 191 was for, when we borrowed the Idaho Department of Transportation's truck,
Oh,
and,
when we had it for like an hour?
Yep.
yeah, and
So
so,
put $191 of fuel in it for the hour we had it?
yeah,
How much fuel was in it when we got it?
Quarter tank, I think.
So you filled it up before we used it?
Yeah, assuming that we were going to use it.
And the $385.64?
300,
300 and 380.
385.64.
Yeah, what is that one for?
on Juliaetta Market.
Mm-hmm. It's the very top one.
Is that the old dump truck?
No,
266.
nothing we have takes up much fuel.
No, I only have, I don't have that, 300.
Yeah, so our total comes to $644.66. The first line is $385.64, and then there's 2 for $99.41, a $34.31,
And
a
that's on the-
$25.89.
Is that on the same day?
It's all said that same day,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's on the
on-
22nd.
Well,
Oh, the
it's-
That's the invoice date.
Okay,
right,
yeah,
But the
see,
9941 was booked.
Two of those
on the
reminders, what she's
31st.
saying is for the,
Yeah,
yeah, because for the account, the 9941, the 266.66, and the 1957 issued 300. So,
well, you've
That's
got it on here a little weird.
I know.
so is our total actually $644.66, or is it not?
That's 200,
26.
230, 250. That would add up to 385.
150. They filled up the Chevy twice, that was 150. 266.66 was the 191.69 and 74.97 for the Toyota. And Then we had 7987, 6791, and then the tractor and the four-wheeler was 2808 and 3062.
So why is it some of them are separated out and then some of them are grouped together in a big lump sum?
Because it goes by the account.
I mean, you mean the Juliaetta market account, so those are different,
No, our account, because some of it has to go to streets, park, water, and,
For fuel usage as far as.
So the
gas,
385.64 is diesel.
yes.
And then, 99.41 Toyota or Chevy.
Yeah,
And then 34.31 is probably the Gator, or is that
yeah.
something else?
Better take that much.
Oh,
gas.
wow.
Or 25.89, I'm not sure.
Okay, the 2888 is for streets, and it was for the diesel green tractor. Then we did fuel for the diesel again, and that was 1.6. Most of this was on 1.6.
I'm just wondering, is there like,
They're separated down at the store. That way she can allot them and divide them, because like streets,
right, so I understand that, but what I'm saying,
Do the
okay,
account.
right, but what I'm just saying, is there a different way that, so we don't see just that one big one, so we wonder what's going on? So I've never noticed that before, the one big one like that.
Yeah, we've never filled up a truck that we
Yeah.
had to do like that before.
Yeah, the 260, yeah, the big 266 and the 9141 is part of the 150 there. So you have to divide that out.
So the two, how much did it cost for the DOT truck?
266.66.
no.
Yeah.
No, 191.69.
So what was the, okay, never mind.
For the tractor was this, the other part.
So the.
Because that was diesel too.
So the total, the 385.64 is all diesel,
Yes.
and then the 299.41s are gas for the Chevy?
Chevy and the Toyota, those are going to two separate accounts. Because one goes to Justin and one goes to Josh. And then the tractor and four-wheeler,
Are the other two?
yeah.
Okay.
I know it gets a little confusing, so.
I have another question. I'm just curious as to, so we were hoping the truck was gonna work, so we filled it up first, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm just wondering, maybe we should have tried it. I mean, I don't have, you know, the state helps us out, but I'm just wondering if there's a better way to,
Well, if they borrowed something from us, I would expect it to be returned.
well, I would too. I would expect it to be returned full, but I would have tried to use it and then filled it, not filled it, then used it, then filled it again. That's just what I was thinking, because that's why I wanted to know how much fuel was in it, because if it was empty, I can see why we had to put fuel in it.
Right, but they did loan it to us, and I didn't want to be in the middle of plowing and then have to go and fuel up. And I wished it worked.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yep. Really would have.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the bills for January 2022.
Second.
Go for it.
I second it.
Motion and a second, all in favor? We're ready for you.
Tony?
I'm up. All right.
everyone.
Hi.
I got one high.
Hi, Tony.
The auditor's here, so. Thanks
See
for
how
having me today.
excited they get when auditors show up?
I know, everybody's so excited.
You might ask when you were supposed to sign, 'cause she still has Jeff, or gets Jeff on there.
Sign it, Jeff, spot.
Can I sign the address?
Nope.
Would be first time. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Thanks for having me. It's good to come back and give a presentation. It's sort of presentation season for me, so this is kind of my favorite time of the year. I love coming out and doing the audits, but it's nice to sit down and talk to the board as well, so, or the council. We're issuing a clean, or we've issued a clean opinion on the financial statements, which means that we believe that they are fairly stated. There is some required communication before I kind of dive into the numbers. I've already emailed Bonnie over what we call our Indian governance letter that just talks about some upcoming accounting standards that are coming down the pipeline. Probably the biggest one is there's some lease standards coming down the pipeline that we'll kind of work through next year. Also just wanted to say that, Bonnie and Lindy were easy to work with. Thanks for pulling all our requests and dealing with us. We come down here, we're a fairly big team, we have 4 of us here, kind of get to pretend we're you for a day and sit in those seats and ask Bonnie to pull stuff until she's sick of us. And then we come back again and we do it again. But I just want to say thank you for all your time and effort. And we didn't have any disagreements with management, which is sort of one of the requirements that we have to disclose in our Indian governance letter as well. Another letter that I have given over to Bonnie is sort of an abrasive term, but it's a significant efficiency letter, which when you look at your financial statements, you've had this sort of finding that's been in the financial statements over the last few years, and it's really related to the closing process at the end of the year. So for the most part, your books are being ran on a cash basis, and then we come in and help get all the year-end accruals all done. So officially, we're coming in and helping you guys with the closing process. That help, which we do this in almost all of our small districts. A lot of our districts and cities end up with this finding. It's just a lack of a formal closing process, and we just have it noted in the financial statements. With that said, Bonnie's been doing a great job dealing with us over the last couple of years. She's been getting better and better at getting all the ending entries ready, going through everything, grant reconciliations, all the things that the city really needs, she's been doing. And the city has definitely been getting more complicated. We got the ARPA money that came in this year, we had all the grants that were ran the last couple of years, we have the bond that's coming down, the interim financing, so there's all sorts of moving parts, and I kind of looked to Bonnie to make sure I got all those parts when I started asking questions. So keep working in that direction, we're getting there. One of the things that's not in the audit this year that was in the audit last year is there was a single audit last year, so I don't know if you guys remember us talking about that. When the city spends over $750,000 of federal expenditures, then you're required to have a compliance audit. So it's not a single audit. And we come in and we do an additional audit. It's not related to the financials at all. It's just coming in and making sure that the internal controls are in place to sort of manage that federal dollars. Fiscal year 21, you did not have a single audit. You didn't hit those thresholds. As we move into fiscal year 22 and potentially 23, as you guys use up that USDA money, that's all considered federal dollars. So I anticipate that there'll be a single audit for 22, and just depending on how the total costs fall out, we'll see if we get them all in 22 or if there's a carryover into 23. $750,000 is the limit, so the project's obviously more than $750,000, so if they all end up in this year and we have this carryover as less than that $750 into fiscal year 23, then we won't have that single audit that next year. All right, into the good stuff. There's 2 packages in front of you. The financial statements have the tabs. We're actually not even going to look at those. We're just going to look at the graphs. I did tab 2 pages in the financials for both the income statements, so if you're looking for a sheet to look at after I'm gone, those would be sort of your results of operation for your general fund, your water, sewer, and sanitation. But if we could look at the first graph, There's a narrative in the front of the graph package. It's basically a summary of what I'm talking about today. So I try to put my key points in the front, so if you ever want to go back and read it, I'm sure you guys all do that. It's there for you to see. Alright, so we're all looking at the graph. Well, I got a bunch of chicken scratches on mine, but it looks like this. Yep, okay. So, when we do your financial statements, we come in and we do two different bases of accounting in your financials. We have what we call the government-wide financial statements, which is going to look at the city as if it's a private enterprise. So when you do that, you see all the capital assets are capitalized and depreciated. You're going to see all your long-term debt. It's going to give you more of a long-term private enterprise style look at the city. And then you also then have your fund financial statements, which is really how the city is budgeting on a daily basis. All the reports that you're seeing from Bonnie, when you guys spend something on capital assets, it's just an expense in the period. So those are kind of the two different ways. So I don't like to spend a lot of time on the government-wide, but I did put this one graph together just so we can kind of talk through some of the big bullet points. The first one is on that far left-hand side, so the net investment in capital assets. That's basically the equity that you have in all of your fixed assets. All right? Total net investment in capital assets last year was $2,301,000. It barely changed year over year. Understand that obviously you have this equity, but it's non-spendable. You can't sell all your assets to run the city, so it is what it is. It's the number. Some of the big additions you guys did this last year was you bought a tractor, you finished up the water line project, you continued your wastewater project, but all in all you had lower sort of dollars at the door in fiscal year 21 than you did in 20, and then what you're going to have in 22. So we move over there, restricted dollars. So your restricted dollars at the end of the year, $138,414. This is effectively the cash that you guys have set aside for your bond covenants. You have your 1993 and 2004 bonds, water bonds that are out there. This is your requirement to set those aside. What the bond covenants require you to set aside. And then what you have is the remaining part of your equity is unrestricted. So you can see your unrestricted equity went from $855,000 up to $979,000, an increase of about $124,000 year over year. Now this is going to be your general fund, your water and sewer and sanitation, so it's the whole city. But that increase is good, and that $979 is really available for operations. Last two things before we move into the good stuff. Outstanding debt, total bonds payable at the end of the year were $503,000. The city paid off just over $41,000 of principal payments this last year. Your 93 water bond, you have 2 more years of payments, so you should be done with that in fiscal year 23. And then your 04 bond is fiscal year 34. And then obviously you have your wastewater bond that's going to be coming in as you guys get through all your interim financing and convert that over to the bond. And then the last thing I just always like to bring up is net pension asset or liability. This is really how well funded is Percy. You guys have some theoretical liability if Percy's not 100% funded. For the first time in my auditing career, Percy is 100% funded. So you'll see you had a net pension liability of $76,000 last year. Now you have a net pension asset of $2,518. That's just a reflection of Percy over the last year went from 88% funded up to 100.36% funded. So just a little update on where Percy's at. Those contributions are going in. Percy's 100% funded. Everybody's retirements and Percy retirement's in good shape. All right, we jump over to the general fund. General fund started the year with a fund balance of $1,016,000. Revenues were $337,000. Expenses were $443,000. And the general fund ended the year with a fund balance of $910,000. That was a decrease of $106,000 this last year. And we'll get into why we had that decrease here in a minute. if we look at your historical revenue and expenditures, I think I should hold this up so you guys can see. If we look at your historical revenue and expenditures, you can see, so it's kind of working from left to right, oldest to newest. On the far right-hand side, you'll see that both your revenue and expenditures were higher this year than they have historically been. You'll also note that in 8 of the last 10 years, you've had an increase in your general fund balance. If we look out, that has played out into where your ending fund balance has been. On the next graph here, what we show as that top line is going to be where the general fund ended with its fund balance. And then that lower line is going to be what the GFOA recommends as a minimum fund balance for government, and that's equal to 2 months worth of your operating expenditures. So when you look at this, you can see that your fund balance has slowly gone up. You had, in 2018, you had a little bit of a dip. That was because you had $68,000 worth of street repairs that year, big street repair project year. And then this last year, you had the dip primarily, and we'll talk about this in a minute too, but primarily the reason why you had a general fund loss in fiscal year 21 was because you guys had budgeted and made a transfer of $203,000 from the general fund into the water and into the sewer fund. So $155,000 went into the water fund and $48,000 went into the sewer fund. And those were based on the budget to make your water and sewer budgets actually balance, for revenues plus transfers in equals your actual expenditures. So as we look into the water and sewer fund, you're going to see that those funds actually had a more stable year because of that transfer. At the end of the day, $910,000 of your fund balance is still equal to about 24.6 months worth of operating expenditures. General fund's in good shape. If we look at your revenues a little bit closer for last year, current year revenues again were $337,000. In the prior year, they were $261,000, an increase of about $76,000 year over year. Your tax revenue was $156,000. That was similar to where it was last year, basically flat. It was $157,000 the year before. The real story here was your intergovernmental revenues. Prior year was $90,000, current year was $163,000. Your increases, you had an increase kind of across the board in all your intergovernmental revenues. Liquor revenue was up $3,500. Your highway user money was up $8,500. Your revenue sharing was up $28,000. This is where your CARES Act money came in, so you had about $20,500 of CARES Act money that came in this last year. And then you also had a transportation grant of $11,000 that came in to cover the cost of the different signs that you guys put this last year. So one thing that I didn't say in there was ARPA money, okay? So although you guys have received the ARPA money in fiscal year 21, you did not have qualifying expenditures, you haven't spent any of that money, therefore it doesn't get shown as revenue, it's shown as deferred revenue, meaning you have it, and as soon as you have qualifying expenditures, then we'll recognize the revenue. So this does not include ARPA money being put into your fund balance. Yes, sir?
So I have a question about the ARPA funds.
Yep.
So we're in need of a new truck that we use to haul the sludge off from the sewer plant.
Yep.
Plow and all that. Is that something that we could use the ARPA funds for, or what are they used for?
So, Bonnie asked me this question too.
She told me I had to ask you, so it's her fault.
So the ARPA funds are, I'm not going to say they're in limbo, but they're in limbo. In terms of your allocation was done to the city based on, you got an allocation from the state based on your population. Here's your dollars. Those dollars can be spent, so you're going to really test me because I didn't even study up on this before I showed up. But those dollars can be spent in 4 ways. You have premium pay, there was revenue replacement, there was basically protective gear from COVID, And then there were water and sewer projects. So those, now, there's something like 70 some or 80 some odd different actual categories, but those are the 4 big groups in which those qualify. When you look at those dollars, they came out, the Treasury came out with what they call sort of interim rules on how you can spend that money. Bonnie's taken some classes on it, she's had to register, she's got the whole package. I looked at it when we were down here with all the different expenses, and I was like, hey, you're gonna have to know how you spent those dollars, because on April of 22, you're gonna have to do your first reporting on how you spent those, and you have to put it in whatever category it is. Revenue replacement is the most liberal use of the ARPA dollars. So basically it's coming in and saying, hey, you would have received this much revenue, right here. You received this much, therefore that gap, you can say that that's qualifying ARPA dollars, and then those dollars effectively are available for governmental services. Okay, so that's the most liberal use of the dollars. That formula was sort of quite a bit of a pain to do, and at the end of the day, I'm not sure when you look at like a city who's based on levy dollars, how much of that ARPA dollars that was actually going to qualify as revenue replacement. They just came out at the beginning of January with the final rules for the ARPA dollars. The final rules, which will go into effect in April, says that the government can elect up to $10 million or the amount they received as revenue replacement dollars. So, that's a long way to answer your question, I know. What's going to happen is, that's the final rule, we're kind of in the interim rules. They said they're not going to enforce the interim rules, they're just going to enforce the final rules, so when you're talking about what you're going to spend it on. My assumption is that as a city, you will want to make the election to say that it is revenue replacement, which gives you the maximum flexibility in terms of how you want to use those dollars. So, it's a long way to answer your question, but if the city is going to make that election, then you're opening up what you can spend those dollars on in a different way than if you were going to say, we're not going to make that election, therefore we're going to spend it on premium pay, protective gear, or water and sewer projects. And then if you've decided one of those 3 things, you have to decide and look at the specific rules for each of those categories to see how that truck is going to fit in and see if it qualifies. Some of the things I've read, your ARPA dollars are basically available till, I'll probably get it wrong, but let's say 2026. So you have like the next 4 years to obligate the dollars, and then you have like another 4 years after that to spend it. There are some people that I've read that says, hey, you know, these more capital project type items, like a truck, has a useful life beyond this sort of period in which the ARPA dollars are really designed to be spent, right? They said this is supposed to help you in the short term, not fund these long-term projects. It's also why they say they don't want people taking ARPA dollars and then just dropping it straight, like, hey, we're just gonna put that in a rainy day fund. They don't want to do that. They don't want you to say, hey, we need to fund our Percy, so we're gonna send it down to Percy. So there's definitely the think tank around it has some very definite rules about sort of those long-term, like how we're gonna use those ARPA dollars. So all of that to say, I'm not sure if the truck is going to be exactly where you want, but I would definitely think that the most likely answer is yes, assuming that the city decides to opt in and say that's revenue replacement dollars, because at the end of the day, you could say your revenue replacement dollars covered salaries, and it wasn't those ARPA dollars that covered the capital replacement or the truck. You could, I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
like it's opening it up to cover your salaries, and then that allows you then to use extra dollars to pay for capital outlay, like, because you have to say how you spent it. But I think the first step is to open up and say, you know, if the council decides, if the city decides, to make that election, that it is going to be revenue replacement.
And that, we'll know for sure in April what the final rules are.
Final rules are out right now.
Oh,
Yeah, so the final, 300 pages came out. I've read the summary, and I've read the details about the
I have
revenue
a copy if
replacement.
you want it.
some light reading before bed.
Yeah.
So, that's a little bit about ARPA, like it's not as straightforward as
Yes
just
or
a
no?
yes or no. Now, obviously, if you're using it for water or sewer, the answer gets a little bit closer to yes, easier, just because that's already a qualifying expenditure category that you can use it. So, if that gives you more information, it doesn't really give you an answer, but it gives you a little bit more information.
Thank you.
Yep. Alright, where were we? Alright, so that was ARPA. So that was your intergovernmental revenues. And if we keep working our way around the wheel here, your other revenues were $13,112. That was up year over year. That your iCrimp reimbursement, you got about $6,000 back this last year for truck and the pole yard reimbursements that you guys submitted for. Your interest earnings were $3,743. That was down about $5,000 year over year. Interest rates have been, they obviously are fairly low this last year. I've been seeing that across all the different governments that I've been dealing with. If we jump over to the expenditure side, total expenditures last year were $443,695. The prior year was $194,000, so an increase of about $249,000 year over year. To kind of work around the wheel here, I don't know why I call it a wheel, I just like it better than $5,000. Your general fund expenditures were $98,000. Prior year was $70,000. That was up about $28,000. Primarily that was CARES Act expenses. So you get reimbursed for it, and that $28,000 of reimbursements. Most of those CARES Act expenditures were in your general expense category. Your streets were $65,000, up a little bit year over year, more repairs and maintenance in this last year, a couple $1,000s more. Your safety expenses were real similar to where they were last year. Your capital outlay of $25,000 were for the signs, $11,000, bought a new mower, and the tractor that you bought was split a third between the general funds, water and sewer. So that was $10,000 for the general fund. Park expenditures at $12,000 were similar to last year. Library expenses were up a little bit at the $5,691. Again, some of the CARES expenses were under the library and then also the general. And then, of course, what we talked about already, the transfers. So $203,000, that was a water transfer of $155,000 and a sewer transfer of $48,000, which were the transfers that have done to the exact dollar of that was approved in the budget. All right, so we're just going to run through the water, sewer, and sanitation fund real fast. I don't have as detailed a graphs. So if we're looking at the green graph here, again, left to right, oldest to newest. On the far right-hand side there, revenues $382,000, expenses $242, an increase of $140,000 this last year. The 2020 spike that you see there, that was all grant revenue. So you got the ECWAG, was that what we decided we were calling it? So that you had your ECWAG dollars that came in were $695,000 and your water line were $192,000. So that was sort of a spike that's, is why that's there from last year. If we look at the equity of the water fund, ending equity was $2,105,000. Now when you're looking at your water fund, that's not $2,105,000 in the bank. Okay, your water fund is what they call a proprietary fund. I've explained this before, but your capital assets are capitalized and depreciated in your water fund, in your sewer fund, and in your sanitation fund. So of that $2.1 million, $1,940,000 is actually your capital assets. Some of that equity is your restricted dollars. So again, you have these water bonds, $138,000 of that is restricted, which leaves unrestricted dollars of about $26,000. So the $2.1 million gets a lot smaller when you take out the other pieces there. On the plus side, your unrestricted went up about $147,000 this year. So it's the first time your unrestricted has been in the positive. And that's going to be solely a function of making that transfer and gets you right back to, gets you closer to where you guys really need to be there. If we look at, so working capital is, so on your general fund, we talk about 2 months worth of expenditures. On your proprietary funds, we talk about 1.5 months worth of expenditures in your working capital. Your working capital is gonna be your current assets minus your current liabilities, so it sort of gives you sort of a liquidity sense. You can see here on our two graphs, the sort of stable line across is your 1.5 months worth of expenses, and you can see that your working capital has slowly fallen. This last year it did go back up, $189 of working capital, which is better than it was last year. Still under sort of that mark of 30,000. But again, some of this is like, you would feel this pinch a lot more if the general fund didn't have $910,000 of fund balance, because that's kind of covering when the water fund needs it. But again, good progress last year, and keep balancing that budget with the transfer, that's kind of where you're gonna be. Sewer fund. Total revenues, far right hand side, total revenues were $171,000, expenses were $98,750, an increase of $72,000. One thing I also, when I look at this graph, you can see is that you've had a positive or a net income in the sewer fund each of the last 4 years. So that's a good trend. And when we look at your ending equity on the next page, you can really see that 2017 negative equity of $192,000, and you've been bringing that back up. So you're on the upswing, not quite up to zero. And your equity includes, so total ending equity of negative $26,000. That includes capital assets of $102,000. So your actual unrestricted equity is about negative $129,000. Now, with that said, it was up about $57,000 from the prior year. So the $48,000 transfer that you guys did bring in made a big difference in the sewer fund this last year. And if we look at the working capital again, same situation here. Working capital is on the rise. Working capital rose about $117,000 year over year, so great improvement. Still not up to where you need to be, but you're on the right path. Sanitation fund, I wish they all, this is true of pretty much every sanitation fund in every city that I go to. It's like the water and sewer are all crazy and the sanitation's just like, just straight lined all the way across. But you can see you've had an increase in each of the last 8 years. Your revenues last year were $100,831, expenses $83,000, increase of just under $17,000 for last year. If you can see your equity, I think you could put a ruler on this line, just right there, gaining a little bit of equity every single year. There is no capital assets in your sanitation fund, so your $189,000 truly is available for spending. And if we look at your working capital is above that, at least that 1.5 months, so you're in good shape. Overall takeaways, general fund is in good shape. 2 years worth of operating expenditures sitting there. Good progress this year on your water and sewer funding. Sanitation is in good shape. I'm suggesting that you guys continue to work on budgeting for that transfer in the water and sewer fund as you guys till you get back up to a spot that kind of above that working capital line. As we talked about, I think there's going to be a single audit in fiscal year 22 this upcoming year, potentially 23. But overall, I think management and council is doing a good job. Any other questions for me?
I do.
Yes.
So I'm not a math guy, but when I'm reading this and I'm saying general fund exceeds 106,000, the GFOA recommends as a minimum a balance of 2 months of expenditures.
Yep.
The water fund is above, sanitation fund is above. Based on your numbers, how is the city not overcharging residents? Like, can we explain how they're not being overcharged? We can laugh about it, or we could explain to residents that we're not.
That's when you gotta have money in the bank at all times, because you don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know if you're gonna have a breakdown or something.
Which is
You
why
gotta have
they-
money in the bank.
Which is why they recommend a 2-month expenditure, but aren't we at 24 months? Did I read that right?
In the general fund,
Just in the general.
but not the water and sewer fund.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, and there's probably a larger conversation if, and I'd be more than happy to have that with you if you wanna have a conversation or have any other questions on the audit.
So the rest of them are right on par with what you would recommend, other than the general fund?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the water and sewer fund are both on a, like, if you were to look at the water and sewer fund and say, hey, here's my total expenses, including your depreciation, so including us making sure we're bringing in dollars that are gonna replace what we're doing. You look at that and you look at your revenues, and your expenditures are greater than your revenues in your water and sewer fund. Yeah.
We were underwater for
Yeah.
like quite a long time.
So your fee increases are helping, really coming from a negative equity position in both of those funds up to something that is now positive. The water fund is positive for the first time since I've been here in terms of unrestricted dollars, actually carryover dollars. At the end of fiscal year 20, the water fund was had effectively borrowed. There was an interfund borrowing of $198,000, which means, so based on timing of when you're getting grant reimbursements back and everything, to pay all the bills, the water fund was borrowing $198,000 to make that fund whole.
That's why we did
Yep.
the budget. We
So when
did
you-
the budget last year.
When you made that transfer, open up the budget, hey, we're gonna contribute $155,000 over to the water fund. It really just lowered that amount that the water fund had been borrowing from effectively the general fund. And at the end of fiscal year 21, the water fund owed the other funds $3,562. So that transfer greatly increased the sort of the stability of the water fund. Like, the water fund's been able to be okay because the general fund has had this extra dollars to be able to say, hey, you got a bill coming in, we can pay that as we're waiting for the revenues to come back in.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah. All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
no problem. Looking forward to it next year. I've definitely taken enough of my audit time, so everybody else can get working on their stuff.
Before you leave, are you doing audits this week?
I'm in the office this week, I'm not next week.
Okay, I'll call you tomorrow, because I
Okay.
gotta talk to you, I think we're gonna, have to open the budget again,
Okay,
so.
yep, I'll be around.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
thanks, guys.
Thank
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
We have our audit for CEDA next. So I'm here, so a few months ago, there was discussion about a splash pad project, and you got a resident here pitching the idea, and there's some discussion, it came back to the council, and he thought that might be something he'd want to pursue. I thought I should come back and talk to you about that a little bit, what would be entailed. Splash pads are pretty popular around the region. Potlatch has one, Ortofino does, Kuski does, Lewiston, the big master plan for their community park, is gonna have splash pads. So, what made that possible, I'm gonna point to the Potlatch project, it's the block grant that you got for the wastewater project that we helped get. There's a pot of money in block grant that will do park projects, it'll do restrooms, pool restoration, park amenities, and splash pads. So Potlatch got a grant in 2018 for $80,000 for their splash pad. And out of that grant, it paid for about $60,000 of splash pad equipment from a company called Rain Deck. And there's different companies that manufacture that. You can decide what the splash pad features are gonna look like, and you can do, if you have the budget, you do a supply and delivery and get that equipment. Potlatch did a lot of their own work. Well, first of all, the $80,000, they matched it. So these grants don't come without a match like everything else. they matched it with city cash and with their rec district. Put an equal amount of money, about $25,000. And they had a lot of in-kind work. So this was a case where the city pretty much did it on its own. Mayor Brown and Lauren on the council basically were the maintenance guy. They went out and they did all the work, and their maintenance crew helped out too. So it was a big effort. It took a long time to get it done. And it's a beautiful project. It's dedicated to Kelly Dahlquist, who worked for CEDA and passed away. So it's Kelly's splash pad, and we're all really proud of it. But it was a lot of work because they kind of did that, on their own. So it was a good learning process. That grant pool is now up to about, you can get a grant up to $225,000. So they raised that amount. Depending on the cost, you have your match that you have to deal with. So just kind of put that out there. So those are due in September. So there's a process to get, commitments on funding and moving that forward. The next important thing is the siting. So you're looking at your park. Splash pads use water. You've got to process it, recycle it. The Kuski splash, the water comes in and goes out. So they're just kind of wasting their water, and you're going to want to put it in your system. So there's a lot of dynamics there that you're going to have to look at, where you place it, the piping, all that stuff. Of course, the grant and all that project can pay for the infrastructure you're going to need. So you're probably going to need some engineering assistance. So maybe Keller, since they're already working with them, you may have to bring them in to look at that part of the feasibility. Then there's an assessment. I brought a handout, and I'll give you guys a couple, but part of the process is whole, evaluating the site, and you look, basically to be competitive, you're looking at things like ADA accessibility, and part of our requirements with the wastewater is to do an ADA assessment, and so that'll include the park, and so you're looking at all the features down there, what are the critical needs, urgent, potential concern, you're justifying why you need a splash pad, why the community needs it. And then part of that process is community involvement. So they look at so you had, I think it was Lisa who was there, and maybe
Yeah, she's ill today.
Okay.
That's why, but I had
she seemed like a real
emailed her.
go-getter.
Yeah.
I was impressed to hear her. And if you want people like that on your side, give them an assignment. But it's going to take the city's involvement, citizens. Have a few meetings. Get kids involved, helping design what it's going to look like. People get really excited about that stuff. You've got the path. I mean, it's really a great opportunity. But you got to start now to kind of look down that road. So I brought the handout, and I'll give Justin a copy, and the mayor a copy, and then maybe Lisa can help out too. But I can lay out more of the guidelines in terms of what you will want to do. But
Because I can always scan it and email that.
yeah,
Copy
so I'll
that
give
to
that.
her.
Yeah.
And then she's got a good idea, because I told her I would help her out.
And that's not everything, we help with that, but, the assessment part is really a great opportunity to walk through the park, because we just got a grant for Cottonwood, so they had this little cabana building that needed to be torn down, they needed a new restroom, and what we did is, the restroom's an eligible thing, we built in the structure, and Rhonda Weemhoff is an architect in Cottonwood. It's a new structure with a restroom and an outdoor meeting facility, the VFW is involved. But part of that process, we looked at the whole park, and my gosh, their playground equipment is ancient, it's not ADA accessible. It's like, well, their park needs all kinds of stuff. So now people are jazzed about, we're gonna fix the playground. So your park might be in the same, you got the ball fields, all these dynamics here, but this is focused just on the splash pad, but part of that process is figuring out what else, you need to address. So that's your mission. We're here to kind of help that along, but it's gonna take a lot of effort. Fundraising, you've got, other projects on your plate, so I just want to, kind of give you a heads up.
Are you anticipating that the overwhelming majority of this could be funded with grants and not out of the citizens' monthly bill?
That's the $1 million question, Mark. It's like, how much match do you need to get this? And you have construction costs, there's a lot of things to weigh in, so it's not just the equipment, it's the whole budget, and that's why Stillman's under, so I'll volunteer him, but you're gonna really need some professional involvement to figure out what that's gonna be, but, a ratio might be, this might be a $150,000 project, $100,000 in grant, $50,000 in cash and donations. But I don't have the magic ratio, there's a lot of dynamics how many communities asked for the money. They used COVID dollars, and Tony was talking about the ARPA dollars, and park facilities are one of those eligible facilities, so they were able to move, the state did, so they could do more park projects, outdoor activity. So I don't, you know, you need skin in the game. There's not 100% free money for anything anymore, so you guys know that.
Dodd, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do they charge for admittance to the splash pad?
No.
So it's just completely free?
No, it has like, okay, so you got vandalism, maintenance, I mean.
No, I mean.
But those things, but I think it has a scan, has a button, you push a button or it's a motion detector, and so the water runs, the kids, and then it shuts off.
Okay, but as far as getting into the facilities, there's no fee to charge,
You
$5
can't,
a day?
do you figure out how to
It's
charge
just,
people?
Justin, it's literally like, you go to the Orfino Park, you literally just walk up to like the basketball court, that's all.
So
it is.
like there's no changing rooms or like a
no.
pool or nothing? It's
No,
just,
it's just an
flat on the
open
ground?
court.
No, it's why you don't do a swimming pool. This is, I'm working with Camii, and I know that Kendrick has his hands full with their pool. This is a way to cool off and not have the headache of
Yeah.
a swimming pool, I'll tell you what.
Excuse me, I've never seen one of these, so it sounds an awful lot like you turn on your hose and the kids run through it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yep, but it comes
Yeah,
out
like we
special
did this, like we did as kids.
Really expensive sprinkler.
No, it's got features,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
and lights.
buckets, they're.
Fill up and
kids
then start
families love-
tipping down, and then they just tip over on your head if you're underneath it. It's just, it's a really cool thing.
If you go to Potlatch Scenic Six Park, please go visit the park, they have the RV facility and.
Oh, it's out there, oh.
Yeah, so they put that in there, if they wanna get a skate park, they've got other big.
It's way into that corner.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
it is.
Oh,
Go there,
I've been back
you gotta walk
behind
through
the ball
park
Ball
to get
field.
Yeah,
To be, but I mean, it's nice.
it's a destination.
And Orfino's is right beside the bridge, so if you go down to the park, it's right beside that.
Yeah.
Further.
Yours would be a destination
Right,
too,
very
I mean, in the summer you've got the ball game, you probably have a lot of folks down there, but,
Oh,
and the
yeah.
path is that's a gym, because people they can pretty much walk there, right? By
Yeah,
there,
oh, yeah,
so.
where I think it should go is right there,
Mhm.
just it's right there, and you can just, it's,
I'd like to note something, Mayor, if you don't mind. That at the time this was brought up in the past, the Kendrick pool is uncertain, and it's not anymore. They're moving forward with that. They're servicing fewer and fewer young people because this community is getting more expensive to live in. And frankly, we have roads that have potholes and alleys that need gravel. I just personally would never vote to undermine Kendrick like that, personally.
not undermining Kendrick.
Oh, that's your opinion.
That's as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the pool's important, I'm not saying the pool's, I'm saying the pool, there's maintenance issues that they're dealing with, and they're getting through it, and, we were supporting them as well, but the splash pad's just an alternative.
Because it keeps the kids out of the creek. They don't need to be swimming in a river constantly. I mean, I work at the park, I know what goes on at the park. I know how many kids swim right there in the creek and there's about 3 holes down there that they swim in. And there's kids in it all summer long. Not only kids, adults.
Yeah.
And for me, I think about, we have a huge amount of people that come in for the baseball, softball, and it's months. And, that gives the kids somewhere to play and an activity for Juliaetta, not just Kendrick.
Yeah.
I would love it, especially if it was funded without our money. That'd be great.
Well, if we
Well,
raise money,
That's true.
That's the
we can
point.
get that,
That's the whole point of having fundraisers and stuff, not
Right.
taking out of the city pocket.
Well, I had talked to
I like that.
Lisa anyway, and she wants to get like a little committee together, and we would do stuff, and I told her I would like to be on it, so.
But your question, those are very fair questions to say, well, you have a pool down the road and you have a lot of young families living in the area too. There's probably gonna be demand for a pool and a splash pad. Both communities are more integrated, so.
Well, and some of the kids that can't afford
they can't afford the pool,
the pool can go down and play in the
which is
splash
bad.
pad.
Their prices keep going up, so
Yeah.
they can't afford that, so then
Or
they
get a
go-
ride up there. I always had a problem getting a ride up there. I was underage and driving.
I'll buy you a bicycle.
I could rent you one. Mine's at the fire, or was at the fire.
So I can help you figure out the pay, once, if you figure out, if you on your own work together and figure out what it's gonna cost, you know, like some of the different vendors and siting, and then get a good idea early on what that's gonna look like, then we can, and then how the city's involved, if the rec district's involved, if, you know, volunteer groups, takes a lot of effort.
If people are committed, it'll get off the ground and we'll see what the best plan is.
I think I'll just give this to Lisa and then she can go from there.
Yeah, she can.
You know, because I had ran into her at Nathan's, we had talked about it, and it was so funny that you were gonna be speaking.
She's on my whiteboard, I wrote her.
Yeah. But it was so funny, because it was just a couple of weekends ago that I was, and we got to talking about it, and she said she still wanted to do it and stuff, and I said, well, maybe we need to get a committee together, and I said, I'll even be on it and help you guys. You know, that way if you do fundraisers, you've got people that are gonna help do the fundraiser, you're not doing it by yourself, you know, so. But I'll make sure I get rid of that, so we can get a start.
Alright. That's all?
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you, Todd.
I have some ideas to go along.
Well, I have Wendy print out this was just to price something new, because we talked about possibly using the ARPA money. So this is it's a 2023 Ford F600 is the pickup. He hasn't quite, because they haven't released the 2023 pricing yet, because the 2022s are all built.
I'll let her know, thank you so much.
So it shows the dump bed with the higher sides, because I talked to Josh about higher sides for the sludge. Now, this one has a diesel engine in it, because he was not sure if the gas engine, he's assuming the gas engine would be available. So the benefits of the diesel engine are it's gonna have an exhaust brake, better longevity, you know, better fuel economy. It is a little more. He can't give me a price on the gas motor until March. It's usually about $9,000 cheaper for the gas motor. We won't have the exhaust brake, but it will be cheaper. And it'll still do everything that we need it to do. So that this one is the price on a bed, a dump bed, so it'll be just like the dump truck bed, and the Ford F600. The Horizon quote is a Polyhawk spreader, that I have pictures if anybody wants to see on my phone, so it's similar to Kendrick's, except it's a little bigger than Kendrick's spreader, so it'll give us more range, and it has a bigger motor on it, and then it has a bigger blade than what Jake has, but it's not a V-blade. It angles, but it's not a V-blade, but it is bigger. So this was just so that we had an idea of what, if we were to buy a new one, and the reason that we had considered going with the F600 or something smaller when I talked to Josh was because the dump truck is big. We can't go down Lynn Avenue with it, because, I mean, nobody wants to go down Lynn Avenue anyway, but if we get something smaller that's four-wheel drive, it's non-CDL, it doesn't have to have a CDL, so if Josh is on vacation or whatever, then Justin can drive until he gets a CDL or whatever, so we have more options, and it gets around town better. But I also did find I found like 5 used ones. So there's one most of them are back east, there's 2 in Colorado, one's Little International, it's only 15 grand. The problem is it's in Colorado, and
That'd be a good trip.
it would be a good trip.
Maybe I volunteer.
I'll go.
That one you have to have a CDL, so,
By way of Vegas.
yeah. So you have to, but the problem with looking at something like in Colorado is I can look at the pictures and watch videos, but we don't know exactly how rusty it is, and it's a 94, so it's a little older. There is a 91 in Boise it looks just like ours except white, but it shows a lot of rust in the pictures. I did find just a dump truck in Salt Lake that looks pretty good from the pictures. that we would have to put a spreader and a blade on. But the problem, that blade is going to be bigger and the spreader is gonna be bigger because it's a bigger truck. So he's working up a price on that, but he's probably guessing 25 to 30. And then there is a, where is that one? There's a Freightliner in Colorado that already has a blade and a spreader that's 58,000, but once again, it's in Colorado, but it is newer. So, the thing that we gotta figure out is, and then there's the possibility of a auction, because the state does auction. A lot of the stuff that I looked at on last year's auction, that was still open when ours had issues, is tandem axle, which we don't use tandem axles, that's too big for us, and they're very rusty. So, but that is a possibility, is to wait for the state surplus. I reached out to the city of Moscow, Latah County, Nez Perce County, Clearwater County. They don't surplus their stuff anymore, they trade it in. So there's no potential of surplus there. So our only option is state, and if anybody wants to look at any of the other pictures I have pictures of the International, there's a video of it, I have the one in Boise. A lot of them, there's one in Pocatello, but it's set up with a spreader body, and we need a dump body because it's a dual purpose truck for us.
Now, do they, in your travels, have you come across, the sander box, kinda like what we had going?
No.
They don't do that anymore, do they?
They don't do that anymore. I did find the one in the Freightliner in Colorado has the new style, which Meyer, the one that makes the Polyhawk that I got a price on. It's a tray that hooks to the end of the tailgate. And then some of the trays have just a trap door that opens, some of them you just open and it has sides and it goes onto a conveyor belt. And then it has little spinners off each side that just spreads the gravel as you go. Which I thought would be a good option because it's not something as big to store. The issues with that is once it starts going out, you gotta tip the bed up, drop the bed, there's a little more bed action that you gotta be aware of. You can't be just driving around with the bed up because we'll take out tree branches. So, but that is another option that a lot of areas are going to. So this was just to kind of get us an idea of what we would be looking at certain ways so we have as much information as possible.
Because with Kendrick's F-550, their box, like you'd said, there's not a whole lot.
So yeah,
of
theirs is a 2 cubic yard,
Yeah.
and the one that he quoted me, I think, was a 3 or a 4, so it's almost double of what Kendrick's is.
Okay.
So, and it is going to require like some maintenance. I mean, we have to hose it out because that mag chloride is just horrible stuff.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues that I come across with some of these used trucks is, rust. Some of the ones that I found in Salt Lake, actual plow trucks, are just bad because they use actual rock salt. Yeah, so this is just kind of what I found and I wanted to bring to the council. I know Dick's done some research and stuff and just kind of, and see what, and if you want to look at those pictures, Josh, you can come over and I can show you those trucks or whatever. I didn't know if I should just email them, but I can show you the ones that I found. The things that I've been looking at is just what kind of, like I've had conversations with Josh, I've had conversations with Justin, Frank, and Bill, of what we really suits us best. And, I mean, I would like to just buy the one in Colorado, because it's only $15,000, but it's so far away, it's kind of hard to tell if it's gonna, like, if we get it here and then it blows us cookies or whatever, so there is things to think about with that. And if we can use the ARPA funds, where it's not, we just have some in capital outlay, I think, right, that we talked about.
Right.
And if we can use the ARPA funds, we're looking at $100,000 for this package here, with everything. And the ARPA funds and capital outlay is just over 100 and some thousand. I did find a single axle Freightliner, just so we had an idea. So it's exactly what we have except Freightliner, brand new, and it is set up, it just needs a blade, and it's $134,000. And Twin Falls just ordered a new one, and theirs is $174,000. So if we can find something used, or if we go with this new one and go smaller like what Kendrick did, we're gonna save money on maintenance costs, because those bigger trucks, bigger tires, more expensive to maintain, you know. Kendrick Ag can do all the service on the 550s, or the 600 is what it is. And it's a little bigger than Kendrick because we haul the sludge, and it's not much more money than Kendrick's. It's what Ford recommends because it gives us that extra payload capacity, because Kendrick's just has a flatbed. We need a dump bed, so the dump bed's gonna weigh more. So there was a bunch of things to kind of consider. So I just wanted to present, and if anybody wants to look at the pictures, I have pictures of the blade, the spreader.
And I really like to bring the size down a little bit. It makes it more usable in town.
Well, and it frees up the tractor to do, because like the tractor, I believe Justin has, he has that side of town, like up there on Lynn and some of that kind of stuff where we can't really spread rock. So it frees the tractor up to do the alleys,
Yeah.
and the truck to do more of our main areas and spread rock.
Like Lynn right now, we have to have Justin
Right.
plow that and then take
And, yeah,
push
and
gravel down.
And Justin did send me one that he found, and Clifford
yeah.
had sent those, and we've looked at those. And if anybody's up for a trip to Indiana, I'll go. Yeah,
No thanks.
But I found a bunch of them in Salt Lake.
yeah, I found a bunch in Salt Lake too.
Some really nice ones for about 60,000.
Plow trucks?
Yes.
I didn't get those ones.
Oh,
You should have
well, I
sent
didn't
them to me.
send them.
Well,
But they have stainless steel boxes on them.
oh, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the only thing with the bed, if we get, it would have to go, like, have somebody weld D-rings in it to tie down the spreader. So we'd have to tie the spreader down. But, yeah, so these are just options that, you know, want to present to the council. And
So are we mainly just looking at this and still getting more?
well, this is just an idea of a new one. So if we're going to order this F600, then it's probably gonna be like by April, May at the absolute latest, because they're 6-8 months out. So if we want it by, you know, and we've tried to find one on the ground, and there is some in California that are on the ground, that they say they're on the ground, whether they're actually there or not. They have a different style bed, they're a little lower side bed, because Josh said that he needed something a little taller for the sludge, so they're a little lower side beds, we would have to have some modifications made. And then, so what happens is if we went this route, it gets ordered, it gets dropped off at Joe Hall Ford, it gets sent to this Horizon in Spokane, gets all outfitted with all of that stuff, and then goes back. And then gets the bed, the bed, not the blade. It goes to Spokane and gets the blade, or the bed, then goes to Joe Hall, we take delivery, and then we can, because this is just the Myers blade that Kendrick recommended, because they have the Myers blade and they have 2 trucks set up to use that blade. So if something happened to our truck, they have a spare truck. That's why I got a price on a Meyer. But if we decide to go this way, then we need to get 3 sealed bids on everything, because if you spend over $50,000, it's required a bid unless you can piggyback with another city or state thing. So I just wanted to bring just a bunch of options.
I just wanted to bring up that when you buy the truck and you gotta buy the spreader and the blades, it comes separate.
Yes, so
And so what I'm saying is, I mean, I've ordered a few new reeds. You put your order in and they won't come out until late in the year. It usually like September when the new ones come out. And so, and our new year starts in October. So you buy the truck and then you wait till October.
Right.
And then you buy
Right.
the goodies, and so you have it in 2-year periods, and so you don't have to go out and borrow a lot of money to do it. And so this way, where we have money in the kitty to buy the truck, and then we can buy the goodies before, as soon as the fiscal year comes.
And if we spend under 50, so like if we spend under 50, then we can just buy either the Meyer, or we can get, Moscow uses Snow Dog, some of them use Boss. You know, the thing that I liked about the Meyer was Kendrick has one, Jake really liked it. But, so these are just options that I wanted to bring to the council to look at, to see, and we can, like Dick said, we can even do the bed separately.
Yeah, you can just,
Just kind of spreads out our time frame.
yeah.
That makes-
It can be,
makes sense.
it could be all completed by snow time. Because we usually don't snow till after Thanksgiving.
Right, so this is just
Halloween.
Halloween.
I trick or treated in the
so
snow.
that we can
So much.
continue to look for used ones and bring to the council as we find them. So we can just kind of get an idea, so if we're going to go this route, we can get onto ordering and all of that.
Well, Nick, you did it, if I may. I think he's done a great job. He's clearly brought a lot of information, and I do appreciate how you're working so closely with Josh and Justin on it.
Thank you. Like I said, if anybody wants to see any of the pictures of the plows, the used stuff.
Can you forward them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, can you just CC me in that too?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we move on?
Yeah, I'll forward them after the meeting.
Yeah.
Josh.
Oh, there's
That's
another thing
me.
on the thing, it's me again.
Oh,
I'm popular tonight.
all right.
So I was-
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead there.
So I was thinking, and Wendy was nice enough to send a potential, sample policy that we can look at and go through and just kind of, because this is for Idaho Falls, but change some things. I thought with the potential of a new truck, or well, new to us anyway, even if it's a used one, you know, that we should just kind of make a policy as far as, you know, seat covers and just kind of better protect our assets. And if we keep track of, like when they get, like in your notebooks, if you put your mileage and your fuel consumption, we can better keep track of how many miles a year we're using them. So therefore, if we can kind of figure out how long the longevity of them is, look to the future to start budgeting earlier for new vehicles and stuff like that. Just better keep track of them, better keep, because I know Justin's last one had a giant hole in the seat, you know, when we got rid of it, and just kind of, I don't know, keep them clean and just take better care of them and kind of go through this policy, and if anybody has.
I replaced that seat whenever I got it from,
Angie?
no, well, I guess Angie.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to look through this and make changes, then we can go over it, table it till next meeting and just kind of see what everybody thinks. Just kind of thought, you know, with the potential of a new one, and Justin's is fairly new, and Josh is fairly new, to just better,
You have it on all the vehicles that are driven, correct?
yeah.
I
And
agree.
we
I
have,
agree, protects everything.
Yeah.
yeah, and we have, booklets in the backhoe, and then we have a master in here that is for the gator and everything else, and
Do you keep track of like hours and fuel consumption?
we are now, well, hours.
Well, I would also put fuel consumption, so
And your
Is-
oil changes.
oil and maintenance.
Well, we've
stuff.
always done that, so.
Because with the fuel consumption, if it starts, like if the fuel consumption changes one month, then there might be an underlying problem that we're not noticing yet.
Okay.
Quick question on that. Is this, in your vision, is this all going on one log? Everything you just said is on one?
No, so each truck would have its own, which I've looked at some different,
Well,
A
each
vehicle.
truck, but I mean, like, all the information for each truck would be on one log? Like the fuel changes,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we've always.
So like, it's a sheet that has your pre-trip inspection, and then it has a spot for remarks, so if they get maintenance done that day, they can drive down the maintenance.
Gotcha.
Or anytime
And
it
then-
gets dinged up, write it down, so if one
Right.
person's driving it and they back into a tree, then the next person,
And then when we'll just keep a file here,
yeah.
you'll fill it out that day, and at the end of the day, you'll put your ending odometer reading, and then we'll just have a file, so then it will say, okay, on this date it had this, I got this done, or whatever, and then we'll just keep a file here so we can better track the maintenance and everything on that.
Nice, thank you.
You've got us pretty well started,
Yes.
don't you?
What's that?
Did you?
Oh, yeah, we're already,
You're
yeah.
already started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah,
This was
we
just a
even,
kind
we
of
even
written
have,
policy.
we, in the dump truck one, or I'm sorry, the backhoe one, for anybody that doesn't know about that backhoe, we have all the specs and all that good stuff in there too.
That's a good thing to have.
Yeah. So, we put that in the notebook also.
All right.
Okay, so, our BOD readings, they are trending up again. They did that for a whole year, I think 2020. And then they drop back down, and, or I'm sorry, not BOD, total organic cartons. And now they are rising up again. And we have to notify the public that it is above a certain maximum contamination level. It's not dangerous, however, we do have to let everybody know. And we are required to try to figure out why the levels are so high out of the river. We have done some testing. We did some testing above the wastewater plant in Kendrick, below it, and then above the feedlot. And we did have some differences in between those. However, I'm not sure that that is what's causing it. I spoke with Frank, and the clear well underneath the water tank, or the water plant, has never been cleaned, from what I understand. Justin and I went down for some maintenance, and there was, what, 3-4 inches of sediment on the bottom. So I put together a bid with LiquaVision, and that's what this is here. And they want $3,800 to come out and clean it, and inspect it, and so yeah, that's that. And I've talked with Frank and Dick, and we come to the conclusion that that's probably our next step, is to figuring out why our TOCs are so high, or climbing.
And where is this? This is at the water treatment plant?
Yeah.
That's underneath, down
Yeah.
underneath.
The finished water goes, or the water raw goes through the filters, and then into a 30,000 gallon tank underneath the water plant. And it's as big as,
Like this, it's in a zigzag.
yeah, it's got,
It comes this way and then.
it's got baffles,
Then it
so,
comes this way,
for chlorination.
Down. That way you're putting in, water.
Frank's gone down there and goes
here,
it out.
and you're taking it out here, and that way it settles the
They get it all out.
ground out of it, so that's, and then the time it comes out of there, and it goes to the reservoir, so this is, all the chlorine is supposed to be drinkable.
I have a
So-
quick question about that.
Yeah.
Way beyond my expertise, I appreciate you guys knowing so much, but is there anything the city can do to help with the messaging of it, so that the people understand what's going on and that it's not dangerous? I understand that there were questions about it.
Yeah.
And I was told right away, don't worry about it, so I didn't. But I was wondering, is there anything we can do to help with the messaging of that, or is?
There is a notice that we have to send out on the bills, which if you read the whole thing, it does say, this is not an emergency. However, I was actually just thinking about that because somebody else came in with questions about it, and I wondered if maybe we should put something in the newsletter, since that's gonna be, our article is due next week.
Yeah.
Something just in very plain terms, and that just explains it a little bit and says, you know, we have this thing going on, we're trying to figure out why. In the meantime, you don't have to worry about it. And I think if you have like some underlying health concerns, that maybe it could become an issue, but everything that I've heard says that's a rare
And
thing, that this is a naturally occurring
And we're right at
thing, so.
the lowest level, so.
But anyways, explained better than I can certainly explain it, so maybe we could kind of.
That would be nice, that would take a lot off my
Together,
shoulders.
do you think that should be in the newsletter for,
Yes.
to go out there and?
Better than newsletter than Facebook.
Facebook is handy at the time,
From the city, correct.
right. So, you know, I will work with the guys and put something in the newsletter about that, but hopefully that will ease everybody's minds a little.
So does this have to be cleaned every so often, or?
It should be, yeah, it should be done every 5 years probably, at least. Frank said that he has gone down, before and hosed it out. Which we can do, but I just, it hasn't been professionally done.
I think it needs to probably be.
Well, then we could find out if there's something that we can
Right.
do in between the cleanings to help
Yeah.
keep it down, maybe. Like if there's something we can hose out, or with a chemical, or something.
Josh, is this the same company we used before?
Yeah.
So we did hire them to already come and do the upper reservoirs
Yeah, and the lower.
when we started. So they already, and then the lower reservoir was supposed to be next. But since we have our TOC problem, we're thinking of spending money there first and then going back and doing the lower reservoir later. But it's just something that they do. I mean, we're required by the DEQ to clean them anyway. So, I mean, it's not abnormal, but instead of doing lower, we'll just go straight down there and see if that will help the problem.
Because that would be our next step as far as,
Well, then once we
The
get
water
involved,
comes
then
in.
we could go like on a rotating schedule. or
yeah,
whatever.
absolutely. Our coagulant controller's down. That gives us our feed rate and our flow rate for our alum. Right now, we're running manually. And as far as feed rate, we're pretty much guessing as far as how much water is coming into the plant. I've got Robert's taking a look at that. There's a PLC that is programmed to run the feed and all that stuff, and it went out. They do not have a replacement as a dinosaur, but they are looking at replacements for that. And if it's anything ridiculous, then I think we could just get a feed or a flow meter of some sort. You know, a lot cheaper than going through all that computerized crap that they got going on. Because as long as we know the feed rate for the water coming in, we're okay. Because our LMI pumps will run manually instead of integrally through the coagulant controller.
Is this any stuff that was just updated when they?
No, this was not stuff that was touched. And I guess for the whole controller, or the whole unit, he was wanting $100,000. And I said, no, we just need flow rate. So I can't, if he's gonna come back with crazy numbers like that, we can make do with just flow rates. And that's something that, you know, $300 or $400 a piece probably. So it's outdated. We don't use it, the coagulant controller, for much. Like I said, we use it for feed rate and flow rate. And the feed rate we can run off our LMI pumps, and the flow rate we can just get meters that tell us how much water is coming in, without $70,000-$80,000 getting engineers into it and all that stuff. Because it's just something that we don't use it all that much. I want to say thanks to everybody that's helped us plow and get through all that. It's been nice to have the help. And well number 9 was down for a couple days. We flushed it, and it is up and running and looks really good. Railroad Street, we went down and knocked some gravel around a little bit today. Filled some ruts. There was some pretty big ruts because of the trucks and stuff, and we had a resident complaint. So we went down there and did the best we could with it. But maybe come spring we can do a little more with it, get it cleaned up. And that's all I have.
have two things here real fast. So first of all, I went to the food bank and I picked up food and I thanked them. And it was very touching, honestly. There's only one class of people in this community, and that's the people who live here. That being said, and I'm not criticizing the Latah County Sheriff because they did something for my family recently that was really above and beyond, but I called a nuisance complaint, and the dispatch told me that they will not enforce nuisances unless the city calls, which is contrary to what I thought I was told in October.
That's contrary to what I've been told.
Yeah, so I was just hoping maybe A, we could clarify that, and B, I personally kind of like that idea, but the question would be who at the city after office hours would you contact
For nuisance.
for nuisances? And I just want to do a friendly reminder, blanket statement out there that any city official or employee or anyone who tries to overrule an ordinance passed by this council is stealing power from this council, and they don't have the legislative power to do that. It's part of the checks and balances. So if the council has passed a law and people want it enforced, it has to be enforced. Otherwise, we open up to discrimination lawsuits.
Yes.
So that's all. That was a blanket statement, not directed at anyone. So just as an encouragement, if we could, I would like to determine how residents can report nuisances and how the city and what the city's role is in conjunction with Latah County.
Well,
Well, yeah, when Sheriff Ritchie comes down, he says,
Every time.
right, so we definitely need to reach out to him again and make sure. And, I mean, I don't know if we would have a how we could do a 24-hour
I don't know
on-call
you could-
person, but.
how you would,
Jail.
I don't know how we could do that. But
I
that's everything that, they told me, they literally told me, you're gonna have to have that guy who said that thing call us because we don't want secondhand information.
And I've heard that too. I've heard Sheriff Skiles say that.
Yeah.
And he said it with conviction. I believe him when
Yeah.
he says that. And again, the sheriff did something recently, the sheriff's department, that blew my mind. They're great service. They do protect us.
Maybe we need to notify, like, the sheriff and just let him know so that he can let the dispatchers know. Because sometimes they do that for different towns, different ordinances, and so sometimes the dispatcher just kind of, they have to say what they say.
Was it the dispatcher that said that, or was it an officer?
It was the dispatcher, and to clarify, she literally would not let me read the ordinance. I had it pulled up. I was gonna read the ordinance, and she wouldn't, she would said, we don't do that, I have to go to this other thing.
Okay.
And so she might have been busy, I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Miss Wendy.
Up to you, Wendy.
Hang on. I think that's all, I mean, if anybody has anything else in the newsletter, I've got the cleanup day at the Bulky Way site is coming in April, so I'll have a thing about that. And TOC, so if there's anything else that anybody can think of, I gotta send that in next week, is when the newsletter deadline is. So let me know if you think of something. And in the meantime, we'll get a hold of the sheriff's department and find out what is going on with that.
Thank you.
I have nothing.
I'll try to make it short. My test is scheduled for February 25th to take my wastewater 2 license. I already paid the fee, so I'm excited about that. Also, Dick and I met with Rose Norris and Jake Lustig from the city of Kendrick, and speaking of the ARPA money, Kendrick proposed that we go in with them on a submersible camera for our sewer system, and also a gas meter, because at every conference we go to, they harp at us about having a gas meter because sewer lines and underground closed spaces are so dangerous. So they're about $3,500. We would split that cost with Kendrick and split the cost for the camera. And the camera, since we're already starting on our facility plan with Keller, the camera, we would generally have to hire it done anyway, but if we had our own camera, then we might be able to start doing that anytime. And we did need one 2 years ago when it, behind River Bean, that manhole plug, that would have been really handy for us to have our own. Instead, we had to call rural water, and then we had to hire Roach to come down and camera it out and everything. So, and Rose also mentioned that she wants to update the memorandum of sharing, or whatever it's called, between the city of Juliaetta and the city of Kendrick regarding the sweeper. And if we did do the camera and the gas meter, they could be added to that as well, like a memorandum of understanding the sharing and the cost. And also, not to open a can of worms, but Kendrick is interested now in coming on board with our sewer project. We told them already, it's kind of a closed issue as far as we go. In fact, Dick and I, we kind of chose the chillers as our option with Stillman and everybody. That's kind of the direction we're going. But Kendrick is up against the wall, and so they're going to have their engineer do a study on what it would cost them, not us, to come down and connect, how much it would cost to have a pipeline brought from Kendrick down. So, and then they will present that to you. There's no decision made, no promises, no nothing, just, it's an informational thing.
So they're willing to spend that money on the off chance that we change our minds?
They have no other option at this point, other than going
They never
to
did.
over